Never judge a military job by its camouflage. Some East African soldiers make more in a month than others make in a year. But what does that actually look like in dollars? Today, we're digging into real numbers, comparing military paychecks from lowest private to highest general across every East African country and breaking it all down in US dollars. Who's getting the biggest deal and who's scraping by? I'll warn you, it's not what you think. And one country's generals make less than another's sergeants. We're about to unravel how money talks in the barracks from Kenya to the DRC, show you pay scales that explain real choices soldiers make, and spoiler alert, challenge some myths about who's living large and who's truly serving for love of country. Stick around, because what you discover today might change the way you see every flag in the region. Let's crack the armoured safe and let's get straight to what you came for. Hard numbers, tough reality, and honest stories. Here's how military pay works across East Africa in 2024 and 2025. We all hear about military might, the tanks, the medals, the marching parades, but there's an invisible contest going on. Who actually pays their soldiers the best? In East Africa, military pay ranges from life-changing to barely getting by. These are countries where defence budgets are growing, armies are crucial for security, and young people turn to armed forces for stable work, respect, and just a shot at moving up in life. Today, we're pulling back the curtain, rank by rank, country by country. How much does a new recruit actually pocket at the end of the month? What does a powerful general earn after years of loyal service? And are those numbers enough for a decent life? Let's jump right in. Let's start at the bottom, the rank of private. These are the entry-level soldiers, boots on the ground, the backbone of every army. In Kenya, a private earns around $155 per month. Not bad, but also not great when you consider Nairobi's high cost of living. Rent alone in the city can swallow that whole. Move next door to Tanzania, a private gets $175 a month. Slightly more than Kenya, but still nowhere near comfortable, especially with rising fuel and food prices in the country. Uganda. Here a private earns $125, and that's barely enough for a modest life in Kampala. Down in Rwanda, the number jumps a bit. A Rwandan private earns $120. Clean and stable as Rwanda might be, that money still stretches thin. Burundi is even more alarming. A private earns $25. That's not a typo. That's what soldiers are risking their lives for. And in South Sudan, where conflict is ongoing, a private can expect $20 a month. Somalia, their situation is unique. Under the Somali National Army, a private earns around $100 per month. Paid in US dollars thanks to international funding, but it's still inconsistent. Delayed payments are common, sometimes for months. Finally, the Democratic Republic of Congo. A private earns about $45. Again, not stable, and corruption in the chain of command often means soldiers don't see their full pay. At this level, most soldiers in East Africa are barely getting by. Many live in military barracks, growing their own food to survive. Some even take side jobs or just rely on their family back home. Let's move up the rank of corporal. A corporal is a junior non-commissioned officer rank in the military or other uniformed services, positioned above a private or a lance corporal and below a sergeant. Kenya pays around $200. Tanzania gives $215. Uganda pays $138. Rwanda bumps it up around $150, while Burundi stays extremely low at around $35. South Sudan around 30 US dollars. Somalia still stays close to 120 US dollars. Again, it's paid in dollars, but inconsistently. DRC is around 60 US dollars. From private to corporal, the pay rise is small, often not even covering inflation. But the responsibility increases. More command, more expectations, and still the same struggle. Now, sergeants. A sergeant is a non-commissioned officer in the military, police, or other uniformed organisations who typically holds a position of authority over lower-ranking personnel and is responsible for enforcing discipline, training, and operational duties. Kenya pays around 230 to 280 US dollars. Tanzania hits around 240 US dollars. Uganda raises the bar slightly to 160 US dollars. Rwanda around 180 US dollars. Burundi still around 40 to 50 US dollars. South Sudan roughly 45 US dollars. Somalia 140 to 150 US dollars depending on experience, and DRC stays under 80 US dollars. At this point, you're likely noticing a pattern. Wealthier and more stable nations pay more. Fragile and conflict-ridden nations pay much, much less. At this rank, officers are leading troops into dangerous missions. They're expected to have college education, training, and leadership. Yet in many countries, their pay is not even enough to comfortably support a family. Now let's jump to the lieutenant level. This is where things start to look a little better, but not everywhere. A lieutenant is a commissioned officer rank in the military, police, and other uniformed services. Lieutenants typically serve as junior officers responsible for leading small units and acting as key tactical decision makers. Kenya, a second lieutenant earns around 570 US dollars. A first lieutenant, around 700 US dollars. Tanzania sits at around 600 US dollars. Uganda offers about 320 to 400 US dollars. Rwanda pushes it up to around 350 US dollars. Burundi again is way lower, around 70 US dollars. South Sudan, 80 US dollars if paid. Somalia, around 180 to 200 US dollars, whilst DRC sits at 120 to 140 US dollars. Let's keep rising. Now we're talking about captains and majors. A military captain is a mid-level commissioned officer rank, typically responsible for commanding a company-sized unit which holds about 100 to 200 soldiers, or serving as a key staff officer in large formations. On the other hand, a military major is a field-grade commissioned officer who typically serves in staff, executive, or command role with a battalion or brigade level unit. He commands about 300 to 1,000 soldiers. In Kenya, a captain earns around 780 to 940 US dollars. A major brings in 1,000 to 1,250 US dollars. Tanzania is close. Captains earn 800 US dollars, whilst majors earn 1,000 US dollars. Uganda offers about $500 to $700, and Rwanda, captains around $600 and majors at 750 US dollars. Burundi, again shocking, only 100 to 120 US dollars at best. South Sudan stays low, around $120 for a major. Somalia and DRC both hover around 150 to 200 US dollars for captains, slightly more for majors. Now, before we go on to the next ranks, if you're finding this information valuable, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, and let's grow this community together. Now back to seeing how much our soldiers get paid to be the best they can be. Now, the big guns. Colonels and generals. A military colonel is a senior field grade commissioned officer who typically commands a regiment or a brigade-sized unit or holds a high-level staff position at the national or strategic level. They command about 1,000 to 3,000 troops. In Kenya, a colonel earns $1,200 to $2,000. Tanzania also rewards high-ranking officers. A colonel can earn up to $1,200 monthly. Uganda's colonels earn around $1,100. Rwanda around $1,100. Burundi shockingly tops at just $650 to $900. South Sudan colonels $1,000, but that's if the money arrives at all. In Somalia, a colonel may receive $600 to $900, but again, sporadically. DRC, around $500 to $800. Next, the general. A military general is a high-ranking commissioned officer who holds one of the top leadership positions in a nation's armed forces. Generals are responsible for the overall planning, coordination, and command of large military formations or even entire branches of the military. In Kenya, a general tops out about $5,500 monthly. In Tanzania, a general can earn up to $2,200 monthly. Uganda's generals earn around $2,000, and in Rwanda, around $1,700. Burundi tops out at just $1,400, while South Sudan generals, they receive $2,000 if they're lucky enough to get their dues. Somalia, a general may receive $1,700, and in DRC around $1,400. Heads of the army in Kenya, who are called Chief of Defense Forces, earn about $9,000 monthly. Across most of Africa, soldiers, especially lower ranks, are paid less than teachers, less than police, and sometimes even less than domestic workers. For those in conflict zones like South Sudan, Somalia, or Eastern DRC, they risk their lives daily for what is essentially pennies. This low pay leads to massive problems: poor morale, corruption, smuggling, and even defections. In Somalia, some soldiers had deserted the rival militias simply because they were not paid for 6 months straight. In the DRC, there's a well-documented history of officers eating the pay meant for their soldiers. In South Sudan, some army units survive only thanks to community donations or NGOs. Even in better-paying countries like Kenya or Rwanda, the gap between low and high ranks is so wide that privates feel completely abandoned. Let's be honest, no one signs up to be a soldier expecting to get rich. But when your paycheck can't even buy 3 decent meals a day, something is broken. And yet soldiers still serve, they still march, they still protect. That's the most powerful part of this story. In countries with little money, little thanks, and endless risk, they still show up. But here's the question we should all ask. If we say we value peace, protection, and national pride, why are the people defending it paid the least? Maybe it's time for leaders to take a hard look at these numbers and ask themselves what kind of military they want. Because one thing is clear, you can't expect world-class defense on third world salaries.